Hey guys, I get this question all the time. People ask me how do I mount my Crossfire antenna setup, and I actually make it, and I call it the Immortal L. The reason I do it is because the Immortal T, there's not really a good way to mount it on the Alien. A lot of people mount it right here, and then it sticks out the sides and gets caught up in the props. Well, the way that I do it, I never chop propeller or never chop antennas, and I don't really have any problems, and it's super cheap and easy, and it works with the stock antenna that comes with the actual Crossfire receiver, so you don't have to buy anything extra. And I know that I'm kind of shooting Trappy in the foot by not selling Immortal T's, but hey, the Immortal L works for me, and maybe this video will help him make a decision to make this an actual antenna rather than me making them from scratch every time. So Trappy, for listening, I want an Immortal L. I have for a year. So here is the Immortal L. Basically what it is the stock antenna set up in kind of an L configuration, and I know this is probably not the best configuration to give you the most range. However, I have never had range problems with this setup, so again, take it for what it's worth, but based on my experience, and I do fly fairly far out, this particular antenna setup may not be the best, but it works really well for my applications. And you have seen me fly in buildings and in very ridiculous places, and I never have any issues with actual reception. So maybe that's because Crossfire is amazing, or maybe it's because this antenna seems to be adequate. So as far as what I have set up here is, I'll go over the supplies that you're going to need in a second, but I have a couple zip ties, and then I have the ground plane of the antenna set up in a 90-degree fashion, and then I have the actual active element coming up in a vertical fashion. And the reason I do that is because I know from most standpoints it's better to have it at kind of like a 45-degree angle L, but when I land on something, I don't want my antenna propping the quad up. So there are reasons why I have it set up the way that I have it. Now let's go ahead and make this, because it's very simple to make. All you're going to need is heat shrink, 3 zip ties, and the stock antenna, and a heat gun or a lighter. So here's what I have. I have one piece of heat shrink, or you see some long heat shrink. This is 3/32 of an inch. I have no idea what that is in millimeters, but if I had to guess, it'd be close to about 15 mil, or maybe not even that much, 10 mil heat shrink. And then I have 3 small zip ties. What I'm going to do to start this off is I'm actually going to take one of the zip ties, and I'm going to go to this antenna right here, and I'm just going to basically measure it out to where the ground plane is at a 90, and it comes just above the actual clip part of the zip tie, the little ratcheting part. So the 90, or the ground plane, comes out right above that, and then I'm going to measure all the way to the top. And I just kind of get a general idea of, okay, well, that's where the active element stops, so that's where I need to cut for the heat shrink. And you can just take your heat shrink here and kind of eyeball it and say, all right, well, I need that length of heat shrink. So I cut off my heat shrink, take my zip tie, I kind of line up my zip tie and my antenna. And I do make sure that the antenna kind of comes out on the front side of the this zip tie, so that it doesn't get pinched against the frame or anything. So I have the zip tie and the active element running up the zip tie, and I will make the antenna come out on the side of the zip tie, because when we mount it to the standoff, it just wants to mount better if it's a little bit on the side rather than on the actual very front at the bottom. So I have it set up like that. The active element is a little bit above here, or sorry, the ground element is a little bit above there, and then I have the active element running up this zip tie itself. So we're going to go ahead and heat shrink this. The active element actually turned around and went on the back side of this one, but it's not that big of a deal. Just try to make it come out on the front side, and you can see where the active element stops, so you can go ahead and trim off the excess. Just don't cut the element, because the element is actually what the antenna is. The length of the element makes the antenna receive on a certain frequency, which in this case is 930 or 30 something megahertz. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put it on the standoff, and obviously this is an Alien, so it may vary depending on the frame you have, but I know that a lot of other frames will work with this. So what I do is I just coil up the antenna, the excess antenna that's not an active element portion, and I kind of set it up like that. I take one zip tie and I pre-zip it, but not all the way. Get it about the size of the standoff. I wrap it over the top, and I actually will make sure that the active element, or sorry, I'll get the active in this. I don't know why I'm getting that confused right now, but the ground plane coming out following that zip tie, so it comes out from the bottom here and then comes out this zip tie. I've already cut a piece of heat shrink to length, which this one's actually a little long, so I'll just cut another one and show you. But all I'm doing is measuring, hey, I want it from the end there to the end of that element, which in this case is the ground. I snip that, come over here, slip this over, and again make sure it's on the inside of the zip tie, or in this case the outside of the zip tie. Just basically away from this prop, whatever one that's closest to it, just so if you do chop the zip tie and the heat shrink, you don't actually chop the ground plane. I'm going to come in here, sorry, and clip off the excess. And then we're pretty much done, but just to make things better, we're going to take one more zip tie and zip tie it about 3/4 of the way up the actual standoff here. And snip the excess off. And then at that point we are complete with our Immortal L, as I like to call them. And really the only thing that can happen, since this is pretty sturdy, is if you go into the back of a tree or something and it bends it, but eventually it's a zip tie. I mean, you can replace it very easily and it's very unlikely to break. So this is the reason I like it, is because if you crash upside down, the actual antenna never really wants to go into the propellers, because it's kind of like locked in this top area right here. Even with the top plate, it kind of pushes it back and gives you this like 45-degree angle style antenna. And like I said, it may not be the perfect as far as reception goes. I'm sure some antenna master like Alex Greaves or even Trappy is going to come in here and say that this is not the most official way to be able to get the best range possible, and I'm not arguing that it is. I'm just letting you know, based on my experience of flying this setup for over a year and never having any issues, that is more than adequate, and it's a lot more durable on my application than an Immortal T. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. I get to ask this question a lot, and I guess I just needed to make a video about it, because people ask all the time, and I'm like, I've made videos about it before, but this is a very specific video on this very specific thing, and now it's on the internet. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.